Welcome back, everybody, and thanks, Alan, for taking the time to join me today. Really excited to get into our topic of the podcast, which is discussing our top takeaways from Medtrade 2026. Alan, you had a chance to be in Arizona earlier in March to understand what the key takeaways were from the conference, and we thought it'd be really helpful if we sat down today and walk through what some of those are, what they mean for the industry, and what our outlook is on those topics. So, everything from competitive bidding to AI innovation, there were several different themes across the conference that were loud and clear. We're really excited to dive into those today. But, Alan, before we get started, just wanted to ask you, I know you've been to quite a few Medtrades over the years. What's your favorite part about Medtrade and what kind of keeps you energized and excited to keep going back every year?
Yeah. Hey, Tyler. Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. Appreciate it. Yeah. I've been to a lot of Met trades. I was just thinking about it 20 years ago. Was the first time I went to Met trade and on annual basis. Personally, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to get to see a whole bunch of old friends, people I've known for a long time. Every year we get to meet some new ones. VGM does a great job of putting on some high class, fantastic events during Met trade that really just enable that social aspect of the whole thing. It's a busy show. We run a bit ragged and whatnot while we're there, but yeah, it's just great to get to see people. From a more business perspective, it's an opportunity really for the industry to rally around the hottest topics every year. If it was 15 years ago, the hottest topic was competitive bidding and all of the unknowns that were associated with it then. This year, some of the topics that you already mentioned, whether it's the resurgence of a revamped competitive bidding program or some of the AI related topics that we're going to talk about here as we go through the next several minutes, whatnot. But really just on an annual basis from an advocacy perspective, it's an opportunity for the industry to really rally around those biggest, most important topics, red tape type topics, but also to rally around the innovation going on in the industry. Some of the technology that we've talked about on recent podcasts really became the center of big conversations at Medtrade. I think people are starting to recognize that these are not just optional technologies, that it's an imperative part of the DME ecosystem. So, yeah, just lots of conversation around the biggest, most important forward thinking things in the industry. I think, as has been well documented, the DME providers face fairly high stakes right now. And in this episode, in line with what I just mentioned, the hot topics were at Medtrade. In this episode, we're going to talk about what leaders, exhibitors, advocates said across the conference based on the ongoing evolution, both good and bad, but the ongoing evolution of the DME industry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great insight into your favorite part of the conference and then what keeps you going back every year. And like you said, a lot of different topics that we're going to get into. Let's start with the scale of the event, which I think tells an interesting story this year. MedTrade 2026 saw an increase in conference attendees and exhibitors compared to where those were at in comparison to last year. That's really exciting to see that more people are attending MedTrade. I think it tells a lot of different things about suppliers that are looking to get clarity and insights into what they can take away and what's actionable for their business. What do you think kind of these statistics around attendance growth really tells you about where the industry is at and what the industry is seeking when they gather together at MedTrade?
Yeah, good question. Super exciting to see the attendance at Medtrade this year. As you mentioned, it's up, or it was up over prior year. I think that signals that there's a lot of interest in being forward thinking. There's tons of interest in many topics where providers are aggressively searching for clarity and solutions, whether it's new technology, whether it, as I mentioned, advocate or rallying around advocacy efforts against red tape, the competitive bidding moratorium, things like that. And then DME's just looking for growth opportunities. They're looking to diversify their business, expand their business, all the things that they need to do in order to mitigate risk and gain scale. Beyond just the numbers that you mentioned, education demand was certainly up as well. People wanted to hear what industry experts had to say. There were more than 70 education sessions on Tuesday alone. I think DGM had 8 different speakers present on more than a dozen hot topics, and the sessions, from what I saw, were incredibly well attended. Myself and Chris Srinivasan and Craig Douglas did a session on kind of the forward-looking view of the HME industry, HME 2030 and beyond is what it was called. And really what we were talking about is today's drivers that are going to reshape the future of the industry, and then concluded it with what a DME might look like 5 or 10 years from now. So as we kind of look at the things that are driving change, when we get to a certain point in the future, 2030, 2035, whatever, and look backwards, we'll be able to say, wow, our DME looks very different today because of some of those drivers that we're really in the middle of right now, whether it's growth, whether it's technology evolution, whether it's some of the red tape stuff. But regardless, the interest in that topic was incredibly high. We had to have, I estimate, almost a couple hundred people in the room, which is super exciting. It shows, to the prevailing point here, it shows that DMEs are really just interested in understanding what's going on in the industry and what changes they need to make to their business, not only to be solvent but to excel in the future. Yeah, just incredible excitement. The growth of the show signifies interest in all the things that we've already talked about here.
Absolutely. So, getting right into one of the key takeaways or themes from the show, you had mentioned it already, but around the Revive competitive bid program, there was an update put on by AA Home Care around the new competitive bidding and other federal anti fraud initiatives. These sessions really gave attendees the chance to be educated on the different rules and regulations and what's out there related to these programs. As we know, there's been some concern with the programs. Industry stakeholders have expressed those concerns as well as potential impacts of related to industry sustainability as a sort of unintended consequence of the different programs and things of that nature. Alan, could you dive into, as it comes to competitive bid, one thing I think could be really important for our audience is to, one, I guess, understand where things are at within the industry, but then also how they can leverage the expertise that we have here at VGM to really understand that they're not in this alone. They have resources, other industry stakeholders who are really busy advocating on behalf of them in their business. Could you provide our audience with a brief overview of kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll leave all the details to the experts, but at a high level, I kind of speak to Medtrade and competitive bidding and where things are at and what resources are available. Naturally, for those of us that have been in the industry for any extended period of time, when you hear the term competitive bidding, it gets people on tilt a bit. It's been a major driver of shakeup in the industry. In some ways, I would contend that the industry is stronger today because of competitive bidding. Not saying that it was a good idea, not saying that it was well executed, not defending it at all, but we came out of it tougher, stronger, leaner, all of those things. But it was really painful and continues to be a pain point for many people. I'm talking thousands of people that were in the DME industry for previous rounds of bidding. So naturally, competitive bidding comes up again. CMS releases information saying, hey, it's on our radar again. It's in the budget for federal government's budget for 26 and beyond. So gets people excited, anxious, lots of things, not in a positive manner, and naturally creates a lot of buzz at an event like Medtrade. This round of competitive bidding is quite a bit different than what we've seen in the past. Remote item delivery program, which really means products that CMS believes can be drop shipped, for a lack of better term, 100% of the time, is really the area of focus of this round of competitive bidding. So what the government's looking to do is centralize contracts, consolidate contracts among small providers to a smaller number of massive providers, quite frankly. So product categories like continuous glucose monitors, urology and ostomy, and other supply categories are the target of this round of competitive bidding. So, suppliers of all sizes that have any material presence or any significant book of business in those categories, CGM, urology, ostomy, and other supply categories, are really anxious and displayed that anxiousness at Medtrade when it comes to competitive bidding program. They all want to know what risk it creates for their business, if it creates opportunity for their business. And some are certainly going to look at it that way. I think most probably don't, but some are going to look at it that way. But yeah, it created a lot of buzz, mostly negative, but a lot of buzz. As far as next steps and resources available, the industry's already begun advocacy efforts with CMS and the White House. Like lots of asks for delays, carve outs of specific product categories. I know there's some efforts in motion to carve out CGM. I know there are efforts in motion to effectively sue the federal government around urology and ostomy supplies, given the super personal and effectively custom nature of many of the products that fall into those categories. Individual product categories and the program as a whole are under attack from the industry's perspective, and just lots of advocacy efforts. So that certainly was a topic at Medtrade. There's just Medtrade is a perfect platform to serve as a launch pad for unified pushback against things like the competitive bidding program, not just competitive bidding, but things like that. Also of note, when it comes to VGM's role in all of this, I'll leave the details to Ike and his team, but just know that VGM's government relations team is actively advocating. They were there at Medtrade, listening to DME suppliers, hearing concerns, sharing thoughts, and ultimately working alongside AA Home Care and trying to unify the message and unify efforts. So it's a really crucial time for the industry. With questions, I'd recommend reaching out to our government relations team. We've also got a strong team on the regulatory front at Van Halen Group and other resources inside of VGM. So we're here to help, and we certainly shared that message at Medtrade.
Yeah, that's awesome. And another topic and kind of key takeaway and theme that we wanted to discuss really compounds on CMS's newly announced 6-month nationwide moratorium related to new Medicare supplier enrollments, an initiative launched by CMS with the intention of combating fraud related to this. Alan, I know this was another topic in our discussion of debriefing on what you thought the key themes were from MedTrade that came up. We've even heard industry stakeholders talk about how this has already hit home for a lot of different companies across the industry who maybe had secured leases or had new licenses or licenses ready for new locations before the moratorium came out. And all that the moratorium entails when it comes to this process. Could you share any insight with our audience on top of kind of talking about the resources like you've already mentioned that we have here at VGM, but also going into kind of where things are at with the moratorium or what kind of the key themes were that were discussed at MedTrade, just compounding on this kind of second CMS initiative that our industry's being impacted by right now?
Yeah, the timing of the moratorium announcement shortly before Medtrade was certainly elevated the amount of conversation that was had at Medtrade about the moratorium. There's lots of questions, concerns, especially from DMEs either that are looking to expand their business, so whether looking to open new locations, or DMEs that are looking to buy businesses, and quite frankly companies that are potentially looking to sell their business. Just raised a lot of questions. Some of the concerns from the provider community, and then of course the advocacy folks at VGM or AA Home Care state associations, things like that, really raised concerns about the idea that moratorium might block legitimate providers from opening new locations or completing planned expansions. Like I said, whether it's something that they had already started the process of opening a new location, or maybe they're in talks to acquire a company. It just raised a lot of questions, because what the moratorium really ultimately does is prevents anybody new from getting into the DME industry, or any new locations from opening in the DME industry. And while I am certainly not the regulatory expert, I know enough to know that when a DME acquires another business, for the most part, they've got to start the Medicare enrollment process over again for that new business. And because of that, the moratorium really, at least temporarily, put acquiring businesses on pause. I'm not going to buy a business if I don't know if I can actually open the locations under my current business's umbrella. We know now that some of those risks are heavily mitigated by the idea that as long as the business has been open and run by a common owner for more than 3 years, which qualifies most companies in the DME industry, that they can sell their business, and that acquiring business can take on those locations and roll in the Medicare program. So some of the concerns, at least from an M&A perspective, have much been alleviated. Now, the concerns around inhibiting a company's ability to expand its business into new territories. That continues to be a concern. We don't know how long the moratorium is going to go on. The initial moratorium was put in place for a 6-month period. It's only got a handful of months left at this point until it theoretically would be lifted. That said, the government, in other instances, when it has imposed moratoriums like this, tends to impose ongoing extensions. We don't know if that'll happen, but it's certainly a possibility. There's no guarantee that this ends middle part of this year or whenever the 6-month period is officially scheduled to be up. So yeah, raised a lot of questions, lots of concerns. I think the M&A concerns are lighter than they were heading into Medtrade, but the business expansion concerns continue to exist, and I think we all hope that the moratorium is lifted after this 6-month period.
Absolutely. That's great insight into kind of those two topics related to those CMS initiatives that our industry is facing, and definitely two of the big themes from Medtrade and takeaways there. So let's transition away from those topics and talk about technology. When me and you sat down to talk about what you learned at Medtrade, what some of the key topics were, technology was also something at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Technology evaluation has become one of the biggest draws for attendees that are going to Medtrade. People want to know what the new technology is, how they can use it for their business, automation, AI, all these different things that kind of fall under that umbrella. We talked a lot about how providers are really seeking technologies that can help scale their business. Those are technologies that need to be able to pass audits, but also integrate with the systems and processes that they have at their business today. As I mentioned, AI related to technology remains one of the most heavily talked about topics. There was tools and sessions around technology at the show. Alan, I think it would be really helpful for our audience if you could just walk through why DMEs need to be thinking about technology, what technology can do for their business, and just the overarching themes and takeaways that you had from any sessions or education around technology that's out there today.
Yeah. To say that technology stole the show at Medtrade is a bit of an understatement. I think just as an industry where we are, there's so many new and innovative products out there, but the reality is companies are just companies are on the provider side are looking to find ways to enhance their business in a number of different ways, and I'll walk through that in a second here. But also the number of companies on the technology side that are entering the industry, these companies that aren't born and raised in the DME space but have these highly innovative AI fueled technology solutions, are certainly entering the DME space, looking at this arena as an opportunity to really improve and streamline systems and processes. So, yeah, it was the topic of so many conversations that I was a part of. It was the top. It took on a bit of a life of its own in the session that Chris and Craig and I did. I mentioned some of the questions just kind of led us down this path of talking about technology and how it shapes the DME of the future. Yeah, very much a hot topic. I mentioned at the beginning of this, technology is no longer optional. It's absolutely a frontline defense against a whole lot of things, but it's a frontline defense against not being prepared to be a viable DME in the future is what it comes down to. There's technologies that are helping companies prepare for, respond to, and ultimately pass audits. And I think there's probably a day in the future where the number of audits that the industry experiences is reduced. And I say reduced, I mean in a significant way, because of these technologies that are in place, connecting payers with providers in a more streamlined manner will help in reducing the sort of retroactive review of claims, because we'll, as an industry, demonstrate the ability to get it right the first time, for lack of a better term, more often than maybe we have historically. It's also going to reduce friction with between payer and providers, which kind of ties into the reduction of audits, but in a whole bunch of other ways as well. Streamlining communication in a way that speeds up delivery of care into the home setting will certainly be a byproduct of tech advancements, and we've already seen some of that just based on what we saw at the show at Medtrade. Alleviating staffing shortages. Staffing's been a problem for a while now, exacerbated by COVID, but continued even as we're several years beyond COVID issues. Staffing is still a concern, and DMEs are in many cases over continuing to try to hire people, being unable to retain people, and they're looking for technology solutions that really help alleviate pressures that come with troubles with staffing. And then just improving overall operational efficiencies. It's a simple thing to say, but companies are looking to reduce costs. They're looking at technology for way as a means of reducing costs by just becoming more efficient and effective at what they do all day, every day. So using the right technology will help DMEs scale for the future. And I think it plays into this next topic that we're about to talk about, the need to gain scale efficiency and reduce overall overhead and cost in general.
Yeah, absolutely. The last theme that we wanted to discuss is related to payer relations. So, beyond competitive bidding and some of the other topics we've discussed today, payer relations also emerged as a key theme from the Medtrade 2026 attendees. A lot of conversation about third party administrators, reimbursement, a lot of different topics, Medicare Advantage that kind of fall under this payer relations umbrella. Alan, if you were to sum up the key takeaways related to the payer landscape for the industry and kind of some of the topics that were discussed related to that at MedTrade. What would be your key takeaways there for our listeners to understand?
Yeah, I think third party administrators are candidly for most DMEs, not all DMEs, but for most DMEs, they're looked at as a um, such a major pressure point. They like greater impact on their business, quite frankly, greater impact on the DME's business than even competitive bidding at this point. There are a lot of DMEs out there, especially on the larger side, that really look at third party administrators, especially those that we've seen pop up over the last few years, as being maybe not so problematic because their ability those DMEs have the ability to be in network and to thrive at the rates produced through TPA negotiations with payers. From a smaller provider perspective, I think that it certainly presents a lot of challenges, and that's what we heard at Medtrade for sure. I know it came up in the session that the three of us did. I think these smaller DMEs look at the rates that are produced through these negotiations and think that they're unsustainable. And they might be right in some cases, which is why they're going and looking for tech solutions to help streamline their business, or maybe they're going down the M&A path saying the big companies are looking to get bigger and some of these smaller companies, depending on the TPA situation in their particular state or region of the country, maybe looking to exit the industry. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that's some of what we heard at Medtrade, and I think that's some of what we will continue to hear. I think one this came up in the session, Craig, Chris, and I responding to some questions that came up during my session in particular surrounding third party administrators. And I think the one thing that the industry has to know in general is that this is largely driven by payers. So whether it's United Healthcare, whether it's Humana or others that may or may not be on the horizon, this is payers looking to gain efficiency and cost savings themselves. So they're looking to third party administrators to reduce their burden. That's not helpful from the DME supplier perspective. Puts a lot of pressure on DME suppliers, especially those on the smaller side, to look to gain efficiencies and effectively to find ways to be in network in any way possible with those third party administrators. But it's not a trend. I would anticipate it's going to slow down anytime soon because it is driven by the payers. If the payers were against this, we'd see it stop sooner than later, but I just don't see that happening right now. Yeah, it was a hot topic at Medtrade, continues to be a hot topic, and certainly here at VGM, we'll continue to do what we can to help alleviate concerns that DME suppliers might have in general surrounding third party administrators. Moving into closing, Tyler, I'll let you wrap it up, but I want to chime in here a bit first. This whole podcast is really about what did Metroid 2026 really tell us, and there were most certainly some prevailing themes. First and foremost, the industry is growing, but so is the urgency surrounding a handful of topics that we talked about here today. Some of them really good, powerful for the future of the industry. Some of them seen as maybe a little bit more damning for the industry, but definitely some urgency is what I heard at Metroid. And I think that's probably the sentiment of other attendees as well. Competitive bidding continues to be seen as a threat for certain businesses, or at least businesses that play in certain product lines. Fraud related policies, especially the moratorium, could have unintended consequences, impacts. We heard that through M&A discussion. We heard that from DMEs that are really on the front end of getting into the industry. Just not a good policy overall. Tech and AI solutions are moving from innovation to infrastructure, meaning these aren't just novel, new, cool concepts. These are imperative pieces of being a high functioning and ultimately competitive DME in today's landscape and certainly into the future. And then payer relations continues to rise to the top as a top three business risk in line with previous discussions that you and I have had on this podcast and content that you've produced through VGM's Industry Insights platform. So those are the big themes at Medtrade. Overall, quite frankly, it's a time of evolution. There are certainly some concerns surrounding whether it's some of the payer landscape stuff, competitive bidding, whatnot. But the growing industry and the evolving industry from a technology standpoint, which will continue to evolve, really suggests that the industry is in a fine and it's in a good, healthy space in the healthcare ecosystem. It will continue to grow, but we need to evolve. We could keep up the advocacy efforts, but at the same time, DMEs have to continue to look for ways to evolve.
Absolutely. I appreciate you walking through kind of all the insights from your attendance at MedTrade, Alan. I think as we talk through what these takeaways and themes were that we wanted to share with our audience today, I think we agreed on a lot of different things in terms of their importance, but the overall arching theme being that MedTrade 2026 really serves as a good opportunity for the industry to have a launching point for the next 12 to 18 months. We know that there's going to be challenges that are persistent, like you alluded to in the themes from the conference, but having a platform that allows the industry to show up and adapt to those challenges, I think, is really important. So we'll keep tracking and monitoring where things are at here at VGM related to a lot of these topics. We really want to encourage our audience. Don't hesitate to reach out. There's a lot of resources here at VGM that can help you tackle a lot of these different challenges that your business could be facing. So feel free to get connected or reach out to Alan or I. We're happy to answer any questions, and we look forward to that interaction as well. Alan, thanks again for your time and all the insight, and we look forward to being back soon with a new episode. Thank you.